These are the class notes for 3-6, constructing parallel and perpendicular lines. First, we're going to start with parallel lines. So the trick to creating parallel lines is using the theorem or postulate that we had earlier, that when you have congruent corresponding angles, you get parallel lines. So we are going to create congruent corresponding angles. What we want is a line that goes through point P and is parallel to line L. So let me go ahead and reveal all the steps and then we'll go through them. So we're going to start by basically creating the transversal that's going to eventually go through our two parallel lines. This transversal needs to go through our point P and then just intersect anywhere on line L. One thing to point out here is you'll notice that I left a lot of space here above P. I'm going to need that space when I copy an angle, so make sure your segment or your line isn't like this. You really need to extend it further so that we have room to copy an angle. Okay, next I'm going to copy any one of these angles down here at this intersection, which I'll label A. And then we're going to copy it at point P. Now I think that this angle here, kind of to the upper right of point A, is going to be the easiest one to copy because I have the most space there. Okay, so remember the first part is to put an arc through that angle, and then I need to replicate that arc at the vertex of my new angle, which is going to be P. So I'm going to move my compass up to point P and use the same setting to draw an arc here. I'm going to go a little further than I think I need just to play it safe. Okay, now you'll see my arcs are kind of in the same place-ish compared to that line. That's because I'm creating corresponding angles. From point A, my angle is like up and to the right. So I did the same thing with P, my arc went up and to the right. Okay, now I'm going to do the step where I copy the angle, finish copying the angle. So I need to take my compass and look at that arc that I have and capture how much it opens. So, looks like mine's almost exactly there already. We'll call it, let's see, there. Okay, so I have actually almost the same distance. So I must have about a 60-degree angle is when that happens. Alright, so I've got here, I'm going to mark off that same distance from my arc at the top. So I'm going to go to where that arc intersects my line and then find where the other intersection point will be here. Okay, notice that my arcs, they look the same, right? I've just kind of moved it up along my transversal. Now I just need to insert a line going from point P through my intersection point. And let me make sure that that is really going through both points here. Going through here. There we go. And if I've done it well, then I will have two parallel lines. Something to point out here is that this is not the only place I could have copied that angle, right? I could have actually copied it down here and used alternate interior angles that are congruent, and I would have also produced parallel lines that way as well. So you do have there are multiple ways to do this, but I will say that using this particular method of copying a corresponding angle is kind of the default way of constructing. So if someone else asks you, oh, is this the correct method, they're generally going to be asking you about corresponding angles. All right, let's look at, oh no, let's look at perpendicular lines. So you'll notice here that I have a line and a point that is on that line, and I want a perpendicular line going through that point P, perpendicular to my given line. And I've very intentionally placed P on my line so that it's not right smack dab in the middle, because this is the point here that it could be any point on that line, not one that already looks like it's in the middle. Alright, so here's the steps. Let's start going through them. So first I need to find points equidistant to P. I can do this by getting parts of a semicircle. So I'm going to move my compass up, extend it out. This looks like a good distance, once to the left, and that same distance to the right. Okay, what's nice about these two intersection points is that they are equidistant from P. Okay, this is nice because now P actually is the midpoint of a segment that I have, which is how we normally did a perpendicular bisector. Alright, so let's take our compass and we're moving on to step 2. I'm going to need to open it up a little bit, wider than it was, and I'm going to put it on point A, and you can either go above your segment or below, but you don't need to do both. So I'm just going to choose to go only below, and draw an arc down here, and then for step 3, going to move this over to B, and do the same thing from B. Oop. So this intersection point I'm now going to label C, and it should give us a perpendicular line. Alright, so let's make sure it's going through here and my intersection point here. Alright, so mine looks pretty close. Probably at some point I got a little bit off, maybe didn't have my compass exactly on one of the points, and so it looks like I'm a little bit off from pure perpendicular, but pretty darn close. Alright, next. Same thing, same idea, perpendicular, but to a point not on the line. So I still want a perpendicular line going through L and point P. Okay, once again, we're going to use our trick of first getting points that are equidistant to P and that are on line L. So here's step 1. I'm going to start with my compass on P. Oops, get over here, compass. Okay. And I need to extend it out so that it's longer than just straight down to L. Okay, and I'm going to draw 2 lines here, and we're going to pick one. So here's one, and then here's another one with a little bit wider of an opening. Okay. Now, of these 2 options, the wider one is better, so I'm actually going to get rid of this one. This one is going to be better because the 2 equidistant points are further apart, and that's going to make things more precise in the end. The other one was okay. What you really, really would not want to have is one, let's see if I can get it really tiny here, like this. Oops, actually, that's okay. Hold on. Let's see. We want that one. Like this. Okay. So do you see how this arc that I just drew now is really, really shallow? It's only barely skimming through that line. That's going to be too small. These 2 points are really going to be too close together. So again, bigger arc is going to work out a little bit better. Alright, so that was step 1. Let me label the points A and B. Alright, step 2. Place the compass on point A and make an arc. Now you can, depending on kind of where your point is and what you've used so far, you might be able to use the same compass settings, or you might need to make it a little bit larger. I need to make one arc, and I can either go above the line or below, but I like going below because I want to get an intersection point down here that's further away from P, so that my final line has a better chance of being more precise. Alright, and then step 3, same setting, but from point B. Alright, same arc here. And now I just need to draw a line through that intersection point, which I'll label C. Alright, let's hope I did a better job this time. Let me just adjust it a bit. Alright, looks pretty good, so I should have some perpendicular lines now. And that is where we are stopping for today.